Burgess here with Music Marketing TV. Today we're looking at Sonible Smart Comp 2. It is the latest and greatest. We're going to be doing a bit of a first look. Let's check out some of the cool new features and then work our way through it. So to start off, probably my favorite cool new thing is the arbitrary transfer function. This is so friggin' dope. Also, the visuals got such a freaking cool overhaul. So let me go ahead and just play for you our input. We're just going to have these horn sounds for a little bit, and then we'll probably do some stuff with drums. So this is what it sounds like. Got a histogram, your levels coming in. However, if you move stuff, and let's give this a bit of a ratio, it all adjusts. Look, even after I stop playing, it will adjust even afterwards, like in real time. That's so cool. That's actually something I don't think I've seen a plugin do before, is apply it to stuff that's already been, written to the screen, a visual. So that's pretty dope. Also, the visuals just in general look so good now. Like, for example, if we change the attack, you can see in green what that does to the levels, and same with the release. And you have your classic way of working with it. So, right, we could have it come in, and there's a bunch of AI modes, many new ones. And I'm just going to choose universal. These, there's some for mixes. So if you're going to use it for mastering, synths, vocals, drums, guitars, all that stuff. I'm going to go with universal and just play it and hit record. And it's going to figure out a setting that it thinks is going to be good for this. This sets basically 2,000 different bands. And in that way, it's kind of like a dynamic compressor. But it's a spectral compressor, though, because it does all this behind the scenes. So it's more like a spectrum than it is like, a dynamic compressor. A dynamic compressor is kind of like an EQ plus a compressor. So we're going to hit record and play. It's thinking, figuring out a good setting. And when you do this, I pulled up the verb quite a bit on this one. When you do this, you'll see down here, this turns green, and we've got our spectral compression. We could sort of mix this in and out and change it along with the color. If we go ahead and make this a lot more aggressive, we'll just max that out. Here's bright and dark. And of course, we could mix this in parallel pretty easily. There's a wet control over here, and then you've got your style. So a lot of this is you've got like clean and dirty. So dirty's just kind of like got a little bit more stuff going on versus clean. Right now, I also have my release on auto, and the attack is at 57 milliseconds. So a relatively quick attack. We can actually click a drop down and move this like graphically, which is pretty nice. I'm going to move it all the way down. So it's going to be just a crazy fast attack. You've got the controls in here you would kind of expect to be there. The ability to shape it. You can also actually change the bowing of it. I can't remember if you could do that in the first one, but you can do this. So that's pretty dang nice right there. I'm going to make this quick because I want to show you now why the transfer function deal over here, it being whatever you want, is so dang cool. It's kind of like a wave shaper in a way that you can define an input to an output, and it can be kind of whatever you want. So normally, right, the knee is either modeled, it could be some weird curve, it could be just a straight up line if it's completely digital, and made to be as perfect as possible. In this case, we can have it just be these two random points. But what this lets us do is here's our threshold, and we could say, hey, here's the line that's linear. And it says if we line up on this line, essentially our stuff is unaffected, right? It's 1-to-1, no compression at all. And once we reach this point, the line changes slope and we get compression, like 4-to-1 compression after this threshold. Well, we actually don't need to do this anymore. We can do some really weird stuff. For example, I could bring the ratio all the way up. I could bring the threshold all the way up. But because I can still move these around, I can still define what happens. We can leave this 1-to-1 line. It's no longer stuck as a 1-to-1 line. So before I go further, you can move points off the screen. And at first it can be a little confusing, but there's a scale here. So you can zoom in and stuff. So that's why they go off the screen. So I just zoom all the way out just so we could see everything. And what I could do is I could say, hey, I'll set a gate. So normally, right, you would think nothing with such a high threshold and a ratio of 1, you would think nothing would happen. But we can actually define a gate here. So we can say anything that isn't loud enough, once it gets this loud, it will be allowed through. But anything below that will be turned down to nothing. And so if we go ahead and play this, got a gate. The visuals show it working very well. We can, let's turn off auto and bring this up so that it's a little bit smoother. If it's too fast, it's going to be all, look at that. That's crazy. Too much going on. You're going to get some distortion. Level it out a bit. But you can also do things like say, hey, we could do some upwards compression. So if the signal is below this threshold, so when the signal comes down, if it's below this line, it's instead of being turned down by some amount, it's going to get turned up by some amount. I'm always mixing up upwards expansion and upwards compression. So, whichever one it is, they have to do with how the ratios are interacted. I believe one's when it's above the threshold and it gets turned up more, that would be upwards expansion. The other one is if it's below the ratio and then it gets turned up when it goes below the ratio, that would be upwards compression. But feel free to correct me in the comments if I have those two mixed up. They can be a bit confusing, but the result here is easy to understand. When it goes down, anything that's soft is going to get turned up. In this case, going to be mostly reverb. That's where the, reverb is the soft stuff in the sound. So this is a way we could turn up the verb in this horn sound. See, hear how much reverb's on there? Pull this up. And we could bring it down. And the verb all of a sudden tails back. We bring the verb sustain up. So that's one way I kind of think of using it. Let's go ahead, let's let it relearn real quick, and let's play a little bit with the spectral compression. But that's some of the cool stuff you can do with this. You've got two of these controls to play around with, and they can just provide all kinds of weird results. But also they can do very practical things. Like, for example, you want to pull verb up or down, there's a way you could sort of tame it. Like if I want to bring down the verb a bit, and I know the verb's a softer element in the sound, I could do something like this to sort of try and edge it out a little bit faster instead of playing with the release, which is, I guess the more traditional way you'd go after, the tail of a sound. Okay, let's learn. Let it look at it. Okay, so let's pick the sound here, and let's look down here at this. So you have your spectral compression. This is how much of all these individual bands the AI just set is allowed to affect your sound. You can also do this in a range. So we can say, hey, from 20 hertz to 1.4 kilohertz, do the spectral compression. And then everything else can be wideband compression. It's represented in gray right here. Spectral link affects this mix. If you do 100% spectral link, it doesn't let any wideband through. The only stuff let through is the spectral compression. So these act like filters now. So I can bring this up, like so. A lot of tone options. Bring it down for a mix. That's sort of a parallel compression type deal. And we can also adjust the wet dry mix here if you're curious. There's actually 3 other controls here that I want to mention before I forget. You've got the ability to do input writing, which tries to smooth out what's coming in. In this particular example, it's not going to be all that important. But when we get to the drums, we'll see it do a little bit more. And then you've also got an auto gain feature here that I've had on. It just tries to smooth out the output so that you can hear what the compressor is doing and not gain changes that are happening. Now, if you do mess with these, this can only do so much. This can get really crazy and drastically change the sound. So this won't necessarily compensate if you do a move like that. This will typically translate to a lot louder with some sounds. So just be aware of that. This is really meant for when you're just compressing things and it turns it back up so you can hear how the compression would affect it. Basically, automatic makeup gain, auto gain. Hence its name. And then finally over here, they've got some standard profiles if you don't feel comfortable messing with the curves yourself that emulate different results. So for example, there's one in here for a noise gate that does similar things to what I just described. It's a little bit more gentle It comes down a little bit slower. Where mine was, you know, super aggressive gate. And so here we might set the threshold a little lower. So the top half's being compressed. If we want the gate to activate sooner, we'd have to move this over some. And there's also a curve editor here that changes if that's sharp or smooth. So anyways, those are useful features. Let's go ahead and bring this down some just so you can hear it. And we'll leave the spectral compression all the way on. Let's open this all the way up and make it 100% spectral compression. And let's just hear the color real quick. So we've got color and style. So there's clean and dirty. Now dirty really is quite a bit dirtier. There you go. Here's clean. A whole lot more transparent. Dirty definitely lets some stuff through the beam. Like you can see the gain almost matches in some cases. And then we've got dark, bright. There's bright. Here's dark. Okay, that's not fair. The trumpets came in right there. So let's go back. So there's dark. Here's bright. So you get a vibe for what those do. And then style, dirty again. Bright, dark. Okay, maybe dial this back to like 100. And, you know, there's a bunch of other cool features here, but there's really two more I want to show you because they're just way cool. And then I'll let you explore the rest, or you can drop a comment if you have questions. So there's a delta mode here, which lets you hear the difference from what you've done, which I always find fascinating. I don't really think this ever guides my decisions, but it's a cool button to have and just listen to. So there's our delta. Delta off. Delta on. Yeah. So the difference between input output. And then there is a mid-side mode. Mid-side is so friggin' useful and cool. Let's go with relearn with mid-side active. You can see we now have 2 of everything because it's mid-side. And now we can really get at stuff like reverb. So for example, we could click on side to make side active. We could take the side and pump it up. Just pump that jazz up. And we'll hear the verb just come right on through. And then we could do our own stuff to the mid. Maybe have this gate shape on it. And now it sounds like it's almost been washed out. Like we have a reverb send that's been dialed up. But instead, no, it's all the compressor. So pretty crazy results out of just a compressor. That first one just was the initial hit because, you know, I don't have any to look at. So very, very cool there. So let's go ahead real quick. I do have some drums. Let's really quick put it on some drums. We'll load a Smart Comp 2 on it. I have the mixer off screen just because it eats too much space. Okay, so we've got it on drums. Let's go ahead and pause it here real quick. Let's see. So we've got drums, we'll do drum bus. It's on a drum bus. Let's do drum bus. And I just hear what it picks. Granted, these are not, I think, typical drums. I was very liberal with how I wrote them. The kick drum, for example, changes pitch everywhere. So this is the setting it picks. We could be a little more aggressive with it, and maybe let's bring up the scale so we can see everything. Bring down the threshold, and let's just mess with the style. That's clean. Here's dirty. Okay, and let's try color. Here's bright. There's dark. We could try maybe mixing this in at, let's bring it down to like 19. Bring it all the way back up. So that's a super extreme setting, and I'm being extreme on purpose just so you can hear it. By the way, if we go to clean, a lot of that, like This is the first time I think I've really moved a compressor to something that says dirty, and it really does make it dirty. So like a lot of them say dirty, but they don't get too crazy, like they don't get too wild, you know. This gets wild. It genuinely does things, which I find actually very useful. So okay, yeah, that's basically it. There it is on some drums, just so you have another comparison. Let's do mid side real quick. Just hear that. See what it comes up with. It's very gentle. Doesn't like being aggressive with things at all. If you're a beginner and you want very transparent settings, I think it was kind of geared towards giving you some compression, but being pretty transparent about it. Now, there is an EQ here, which can help deal with stuff like triggering stuff you don't want. So you could have it, I can move it up higher just to make sure, I don't need to move it up that high, like 120 is fine, just so that it doesn't trigger off the kick, for example. So this would be driven mostly by, not the kick in the upper end of the spectrum. So this is just an EQ to help make sure that, stuff like that it's not triggering off sounds you don't want triggering it. Like the kick can be a very loud element, and as a result, it can drive compressors, and then your compressor sounds like it's pumping because the kick is driving it. And while we're on that note, actually, let me go ahead and bring the mixer over here and show you real quick how to set up Sidechain. So it's really easy, but I've got this, the horn has it on here. Let's just drive it with the kick. So I've got the kick going in. You're going to need to send a sidechain signal to it. In FL, you just click and remove the signal. So it's like a send with no signal, essentially. And this will send the kick, but the kick won't actually, show up here. The signal of the kick goes there as a sidechain signal. You go to the smart compressor, and I can move this out of the way. So this is on the horns channel. And if I, turn this on, and we've got that really crazy setting, which is fine. We just want to see this working. So the first thing we need to do is turn on external sidechain so that it knows we're going to use an external signal. And you need VST3 for this. So we're going to come into the settings icon. You click this cog and go here. Go to processing, and then on sidechain, turn that on and select the kick. And this will make the kick the sidechain input. And this makes sure that the plugin uses this input. So now we'll see that there will be dips whenever the kick hits. There you go. And that's how you set up sidechain. So super easy, super fast, not hard at all. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.